Look at the massive concrete skyline of a modern city. The towers of glass and steel rise toward the clouds, humming with the constant energy of electricity, data, and human activity. We look at this vast infrastructure and assume that if our world were to end, it would take centuries of slow, painful decay to erase us. We imagine a long, slow slide into ruin, a gradual fading of our institutions, a slow shrinking of our borders. But the historical records tell a far more terrifying story. Historical records document up to 15 ancient civilizations that did not slowly decay, but instead suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. One day their streets were filled with the noise of trade, the laughter of children, and the busy hum of daily life. The next, they were silent monuments of stone and dirt, completely empty of human life. How does a thriving metropolis of tens of thousands of people, with advanced infrastructure, art, and technology, simply vanish, without leaving a single written record of where they went, or a single body in the streets? A core group of 5 exceptionally powerful ancient civilizations are repeatedly identified by researchers as the most significant and unexplained vanishings in human history. These societies vanished so abruptly and thoroughly that modern investigations describe them as having disappeared without a trace. The sudden vanishing of these established, powerful populations remains classified as one of history's greatest unexplained mysteries. This is not a slow fade, this is an erasure. It challenges our fundamental belief that modern society is immune to instant collapse. We look at their empty stone cities, their grand plazas, and their abandoned homes, and we are forced to ask a chilling question. Which advanced ancient cultures vanished without leaving a clear trace? And what does their disappearance mean for our own future? Today, we explore these 5 powerful societies, examining the physical evidence left behind in their empty streets, and try to piece together the final hours of these lost worlds. We begin our exploration in the arid canyons of a vast desert region. Here, in a harsh landscape of red sandstone and deep gorges, a powerful civilization constructed magnificent multi-story stone cities inside sheer cliff faces. These were not simple mud shelters. These were engineering marvels, built into the natural alcoves of massive sandstone cliffs, hanging high above the canyon floors. The builders constructed these fortress-like cities using hand-cut stone blocks, wooden beams, and mortar, creating complex apartment-like structures with hundreds of rooms, ceremonial chambers dug into the earth, and elevated storage granaries. They spent generations building these highly secure, labor-intensive fortresses, creating a thriving society in a dry, challenging environment. But in the distant past, this entire regional population was gone. The cities were suddenly and completely abandoned. When explorers first entered these cliff dwellings, they found a scene that looked as if the inhabitants had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. Food was still stored in clay jars. Grinding stones and cooking tools were left lying on the floors. The hearths were cold, but the ashes of their last fires were still intact. There were no signs of a climactic battle, no mass graves, and no evidence of a foreign invasion. The sudden departure of an entire regional population left behind empty stone cities that remained untouched for centuries, preserved by the dry desert air. How does an entire population decide to walk away from their homes? The answer was locked inside the wood they used to build their cities. The rings of ancient trees reveal a devastating, multi-decade environmental crisis, a prolonged drought where the rains simply stopped. For over 2 decades, the springs dried up and the crops withered under the relentless sun. In this arid environment, water was life. As the water vanished, the social fabric began to fray. We see evidence of localized conflict, of desperate defenses, and of resource hoarding, as communities tried to protect what little food and water they had left. But they did not fight to the last. Instead of engaging in a war of total mutual destruction, the population made a collective, desperate decision to abandon their ancestral home. They walked away from their massive stone investments, from the safety of their cliff dwellings, and from the graves of their ancestors. They dispersed into the wider region, leaving their unique cliff-dwelling way of life behind. They chose survival over their stone monuments, leaving their cities to become ghosts in the canyon walls. Now, let us travel to the fertile floodplains of a massive river system. In the distant past, a massive urban center grew in this region that was larger than major European capitals of the same era. This was a bustling city of tens of thousands of people, the heart of a vast culture. The inhabitants did not build with stone, but with the earth itself. They constructed giant earthen mounds, the largest of which stands towering high above the plains, covering more ground at its base than the great pyramids of the ancient world. This massive structure dominated the city, serving as the political and religious heart of a trade network that stretched across the continent. Yet in the distant past, this bustling metropolis of tens of thousands of people was completely empty. They left no written records, no carved stone monuments, and no explanations for where they went. The sudden silence of this great city remains a deep historical mystery. How could a city that dominated the continent's trade networks simply dissolve into the forest? To find the answer, researchers had to dig beneath the soil of the floodplain. The physical evidence reveals that the city's rapid growth carried the seeds of its own destruction. To sustain a city of that size, the inhabitants required massive amounts of wood. They cleared the local hillsides, cutting down vast forests to build homes, fuel fires, and construct massive defensive walls to protect the city center. This massive deforestation had a disastrous consequence. Without tree roots to stabilize the soil, the heavy rains washed the dirt from the hillsides directly into the river systems. The rivers clogged with silt, and when the seasonal floods came, they were catastrophic. The floods repeatedly inundated the agricultural fields, destroying the crops that fed the massive population. As famine loomed, the social order began to break down. Internal political instability arose, fracturing the centralized authority that held the diverse city population together. The citizens did not wait for a single, catastrophic end. They abandoned the flooded, politically unstable city in waves, searching for food and stability elsewhere. They left the massive earthen mounds to be slowly reclaimed by the forest, leaving behind a silent testament to the limits of human engineering. Let us cross the ocean to a vast, fertile river valley. This civilization was a Bronze Age giant, spanning a vast territory that made it far larger than other contemporary empires. The people possessed an unprecedented level of urban planning. Their cities were built on a strict grid pattern, with wide streets, sophisticated indoor plumbing systems, public baths, and standardized brick sizes that were uniform across vast distances. They were masters of trade, engineering, and craftsmanship. But what makes this civilization truly unique is what they did not build. Unlike other ancient empires, they left behind no grand monuments to kings, no massive temples to gods, and no evidence of standing armies or warfare. They were a peaceful, trade-oriented society. Yet in the distant past, this massive, peaceful civilization suddenly stopped writing, stopped trading, and abandoned their pristine cities. Their sophisticated script, which we still cannot read today, disappeared from the archaeological record. The cities were left to be buried by the shifting sands of time. For decades, researchers debated what could have caused such a massive, stable society to vanish. The answer lies in the shifting geology of the region. Geological studies show that tectonic shifts altered the paths of the rivers that fed the valley. The vital river system, which once flowed and provided water to countless farms and cities, began to dry up. Without water for their sophisticated irrigation systems, the massive agricultural surplus that sustained the city's collapse. The water that once filled their public baths and flushed their indoor toilets was gone. Rather than starving in their brick homes, the citizens made the practical decision to migrate. They moved toward other regions where water was still plentiful. But in doing so, they had to abandon their urban lifestyle. They could no longer sustain the large, organized cities. The sophisticated script, the standardized weights and measures, and the advanced urban planning vanished, showing how quickly advanced technology can be lost when survival is at stake. The people survived, but their civilization was erased. Turn to a maritime civilization that dominated sea trade routes. They built grand palaces that served as the centers of their economic and political power. Their greatest palace was a labyrinth of stone, featuring beautiful frescoes, complex plumbing, and wealth that influenced the entire ancient world. They were the masters of the sea, secure on their island home, seemingly immune to the conflicts that plagued the mainland. But in the distant past, this thriving maritime empire suffered a sudden, cataclysmic collapse. Their cities and palaces were burned and abandoned. For millennia, their sudden disappearance was remembered only as a myth of a sunken kingdom, a story told of a powerful land that was swallowed by the ocean in a single day and night. The reality behind the myth is even more terrifying than the legend. Near their island lay a volcanic island. In the distant past, the volcano at the heart of that island erupted with an unimaginable explosive force. It was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. The eruption triggered massive waves that raced across the sea. Monstrous waves battered the coast of the maritime empire, smashing their merchant fleet and destroying their economic lifeline in a matter of hours. The air was filled with toxic gas, and thick volcanic ash blanketed the agricultural fields, blocking out the sun and causing widespread famine. The loss of their navy, their crops, and their trade networks destabilized the ruling class's authority. The people lost faith in the leaders, who could no longer protect them from the anger of the earth. In this weakened state, the crippled civilization was easily overrun by mainland invaders. The grand palaces were burned, the unique culture was erased from the historical stage, and the memory of their empire was buried under layers of volcanic ash and myth. Finally, look at a highly sophisticated society that built towering stone pyramids reaching above the jungle canopy. They boasted millions of citizens, advanced mathematics, an accurate calendar system, and a complex writing system. They successfully managed their rainforest environment for generations, building massive cities. Yet, during a period of severe climate shift, this great civilization experienced a rapid and total societal collapse. Grand cities were suddenly abandoned to the encroaching jungle. Monuments were left half-carved, with the tools of the stonemasons still lying at their bases. The population of these cities plummeted, and the jungle slowly reclaimed the stone plazas and pyramids. How a civilization that had mastered the rainforest for so long could suddenly dissolve remains one of history's premier mysteries. To answer which advanced cultures vanished without a clear trace, we must look at the invisible threads that connect all five of these societies. Scientific analysis of lake sediments in the region reveals that they suffered a series of severe, multi-decade megadroughts during the period of their collapse. These droughts depleted their reservoirs and ruined their crops. The common thread across all five civilizations is that they did not physically vaporize. The people did not turn to dust. Rather, their complex social systems collapsed. In all five cases, the centralized systems that managed resources, maintained order, and distributed food failed. When the centralized systems failed, the populations did not stay to die in their stone cities. They scattered. They broke apart into smaller, decentralized groups, reverting to simpler ways of life, where they did not depend on a distant king or a complex trade network to survive. They left their grand stone monuments behind as silent ghosts, monuments to a complexity they could no longer afford to maintain. The story of these vanished civilizations teaches us that societal complexity is a fragile shield, not a permanent shield. As societies grow more advanced, they become hyper-dependent on stable climate conditions, predictable resources, and complex logistics networks to survive. When the environment shifts, or when those resource chains break, the very complexity that made these empires strong becomes the catalyst for their rapid collapse. We look at our own towering cities, our global supply chains, and our digital networks, and we assume we are different. We assume we are permanent. But we must remember that our own world is built on the same foundations of resource stability that failed these ancient civilizations. We are carrying the DNA of the survivors, the people who had the grit to walk away from the crumbling stone cities and adapt to a changing world. The lesson they left us is simple: do not mistake complexity for strength. When the systems we rely on fail, our survival will depend not on the height of our towers, but on our ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to change. What do you think? Are we heading toward a similar collapse, or will our technology save us? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like if this story made you think, and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the hidden truths of our past.